Do you remember the part of Conker's Bad Fur Day where you had to help a horned out old bee hook up with an anatomically gifted sunflower? Well, I do, so let's take a minute to talk about it. But before we get into that, what do you think is the worst scene in Conker's Bad Fur Day to be playing when your parents walked into the room? Drop it in the comments below. So the story begins when you first encounter the queen bee, and she is absolutely distraught. She's upset because some mean old nasty wasps up the road have stolen the hive. She needs somebody to go get it back for her, and there's nobody there to help her. So Conker, being the kind and loving kind of individual that he is, decides that he'll go get it for her to calm her down. He kinda also thinks maybe she's rich, being a queen and all. So you head up the road, you find the nest, or hive, whatever you want to call it, and you grab the thing up, and as soon as you get it, a bunch of wasps come flying out of their hive, and they're like, hey, somebody's trying to steal our hive, let's go get him. And then there's like this stupid one who's like, yeah, let's go get him. And he's just funny and sounds like an idiot. So anyway, they start chasing you down. They're like trying to sting you. So they're like stabbing down into the ground behind you. And they're like chirping you the whole way, making fun of you. So you get back to the queen, hive in hand, and you throw it up there where she wants it. It opens up and she climbs inside, and two little guns pop out like a turret. So the old bee takes aim. She locks on to each and every single one of them. You can see the fear in their eyes. And then Conker says, eat a lead, mother buzzer. And the old lady blasts them. She opens fire, shoots them each one by one, drops them, and it's hilarious. This part is important to the story of the king bee because after you help the queen bee, she explains to you how grateful she is and how none of this would be happening if it wasn't for her stupid deadbeat husband who's left her for another woman. Which, of course, you know Conker, he's not like the most sympathetic about that. He's kind of an asshole after all. But then the queen bee tells him he's like a friend of the bee community and he's oh so wonderful and all that stuff. And then she throws him some cash because why not? And of course, every time Conker interacts with Cash in this game, it's kind of funny. His eyes spin and they stop with a dollar sign in them, and he'll say something silly. The Cash will say something silly to him, and sometimes it's really off the wall stuff. It's kind of a neat little touch in the game. Something I've always enjoyed. So later on, you're in the barn and you pull a big switch down, and this door opens up, and the king bee goes tumbling out. Now he's sitting on the ground out front of the barn. And then you go up and you talk to him, and he tries to bum money off of you, ironically enough. Of course, Conker doesn't take kindly to this guy trying to bum money off of him, kinda doesn't have time for him, he's a little impatient with him, which is a little funny. But then the king bee starts in on some rant about how his wife kicked him out because the hive keeps getting stolen, but he doesn't care, he insults her and stuff. And then he complains about how he's been reduced to the status of a bum. Conker tells him how he'd better be on his way and stuff, and the king bee is like, whatever, you're like the rest of them. I guess I'm not gonna tell you about the big-breasted babe then. And of course this gets Conker's attention. He's like, the what? And he's got this look on his face. And then the king clarifies and he says something about how, you know, all he wants to do is pollinator, and he carries on just raving about her for a minute, just going on. And then Conker's like, well, what do you mean? I thought she had big. And then the king points her out, and then you see that she's like a sunflower off in the distance. And then Conker's totally like bluntly, he's like, she's a sunflower, how does she have boobs? Then the king's like, yeah, duh, I'm a bee, stupid, come on. After a brief exchange, the king bee is literally begging for Conker to help him out, and at this point Conker's like, well, okay, but what's in it for me? So the king says, money, and then at that point Conker points out the fact that he was just begging a moment ago, which leads to kind of an awkward moment between the two of them where the king is like, oh, he sussed me out. And it's moments like that that have always stuck out in my mind from this game since I was like 13 years old and I first played it. So before we carry on to get to what every other 13-year-old boy was looking forward to at this point in this game, I'd like to ask that if you're enjoying this hidden nostalgia from back in the day, you consider liking the video and maybe even subscribing to the channel. That would be really nice. let's get back to it. So at this point in the game, you discover the bees, the swarms of bees, aka the tickly bees. They start swarming around Conker, and he starts laughing. He's like, oh no, it tickles, stop it, don't do that. And they explain in their buzzy little voices that they are tickly bees. They don't sting people, they're pacifists. And they're looking for perhaps a ticklish flower, perhaps a sunflower of sorts. And well, what do you know, we just happen to have discovered one who might could use a tickling. Mostly, of course, to the delight of the king. So, you lure the bees over to her, they start to swarm around her. And she starts to giggle and laugh, and Conker says, oh, this seems to be working. Oh, but I need more, so where can I find more? So then you take off and you find about, I think it's 5 swarms of bees, and you bring them over to her. And then she just kind of loses control and bears it all. And along comes Mr. King Bee, and he is very excited, of course. And he tells you, alright, I'm going in. And then Conker stares on in absolute horror as the king and the sunflower have their fun. And they seem to have had a pretty good time. And then the king bee thanks Conker for everything that he's done for him. And says that he feels like a new man, and the sunflower concurs and offers to send Conker for a bounce. And at this point, Conker stares you in the eye and says, a bounce? So this is what I call a platforming game, and breaks the fourth wall a little bit. And then you jump onto the sunflower's balsams, and you bounce up and down. And you get high enough to fly up behind her to the little hole that has the cache in it. And this interaction with the cache is hilarious. Yeah, that's the end of that little sequence. You no longer really need to deal with the sunflower or the bee at this point, but it leaves you with a hilarious and lasting memory of this game. And if your parents walked into the room while you were playing this part, you probably didn't get to finish the game. You might have got whooped. And you definitely got grounded for at least a little while, or your parents thought, man, my kid's a freak, and just kinda ignored it. Unlike your parents, you probably appreciated this part of the game and thought it was hilarious, and it's probably something you look back on and think it was pretty silly. And if that's the case, and you enjoyed watching this video, then I really hope you'll consider checking out some of my other videos, like this one right here, where we can take a look at another part of another game and enjoy a little bit more nostalgia together.